I saw you. Last night when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, and you finally stopped holding it together and let it out. I was there. I saw you press your face into the pillow so no one would hear. I saw you sit on the bathroom floor. I saw you stare at the ceiling in the dark with the tears running sideways, and the silence feeling too loud, and the weight of everything you have been carrying pressing down on your chest in a way that made breathing feel like effort. I saw every single moment of it, and I could not stay silent any longer. Not after what I witnessed. Not after watching you carry this the way you have been carrying it. I am speaking today because what I saw deserves to be answered. You have gotten very good at holding it together in front of people. So good that the people around you probably have no real idea how close to the edge you have been. You have learned to smile at the right moments and respond when asked if you are okay with something that sounds enough like fine that no one presses further. You have learned to wait until you are alone before you let the real version of what you are feeling come to the surface. And so the moments when the truth comes out are always the private ones. The car, the shower, the space between waking and sleeping when you cannot hold the guard up anymore because you are too tired. Those are the moments when what you are actually carrying becomes visible, and those are the moments that I am talking about when I say, I saw you. I want you to understand something about those private moments. They are not your weakest moments, even though they feel that way. They are actually your most honest moments. The public performance of being fine takes enormous energy, and it is held together by more than by reality. The private breakdown is what is actually true. And what is true in those moments is that you are a person who has been carrying more than a person should carry alone, and who has reached the honest limit of what strength alone can hold. That is not failure. That is the accurate acknowledgement of a real situation, and it is the prerequisite for receiving the help you actually need. I want to ask you something that I already know the answer to, but I want you to hear yourself answer it honestly. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been holding it together for everyone else during the day and then falling apart alone at night? Weeks. Longer. How long have you been the person who is always available for other people's struggles while managing your own in the margins? How long have you been telling yourself you are fine in the daylight and then discovering in the dark that fine was not accurate at all? I want you to count that time honestly, not to shame yourself about it, but to let yourself feel the weight of how long you have been doing this without adequate support. That length matters. It is part of what makes what you are carrying as heavy as it is. I want to speak to what the crying is actually about, because sometimes the tears know things that the conscious mind has not yet fully processed. Sometimes you are crying and you could not give an exact articulate reason for the tears because the feeling is larger and more diffuse than any single cause. It is the accumulated weight of everything. The specific things that are hard right now and the grief that has not fully been processed from things that ended previously, and the fear about the future, and the exhaustion of the daily effort, and the loneliness of carrying all of this without enough genuine support, and the longing for something easier or something different, or just for someone to see how hard this actually is. All of that comes out in the private moments because it has nowhere else to go. And I want to tell you that every single layer of it is something I am aware of, and something I am present in, and something I care about with a depth that I want you to feel today. I know there are things in the crying that you have not spoken out loud to anyone, the specific fears that feel too dark to voice, the specific grief that feels too complicated to explain, the specific longing that feels too vulnerable to admit, the specific anger that feels too uncomfortable to name. All of it comes out in the private moments, but it remains private because the idea of saying it out loud to another person feels riskier than containing it. I want to be the first place those things are spoken. I already know them. Saying them to me is not revealing something I was not aware of. It is simply giving them a voice instead of letting them live unexpressed in your interior, where they accumulate weight with every passing day they go unnamed. I want to speak to the specific loneliness of the person who has people around them and still feels profoundly alone, because the loneliness you are carrying is not necessarily the loneliness of physical isolation. You may have family and friends and colleagues and a full enough social calendar. But there is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from not being genuinely known by the people who are present in your life, from being surrounded by people who know the performed version of you, but not the real version, from having connections that exist at a level that feels meaningful enough on the surface, but that have never reached the place where what you are really carrying has been seen and held. That loneliness is one of the most painful kinds because it is invisible from the outside, and because the people around you cannot offer you what you need from them when they do not know you need it. I want to speak to what happens in your body in those private moments. The physical release of what has been held in, the way the chest loosens a little after the tears, even though nothing about the situation has changed. The particular exhaustion that follows the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep. That physical response is not weakness. It is your body finally being allowed to process what your mind has been managing all day. The body keeps an honest record of what is being carried, and the private moments of release are the body catching up to the truth that the public performance was suppressing. Honor those moments. They are not signs that you are falling apart. They are signs that you are human, and that what you are carrying is genuinely heavy, and that your body knows it even when your mind is trying to override that knowledge. I want to speak to those of you who cry and then immediately feel embarrassed about the crying even when you are alone, who wipe the tears and tell yourself to stop and feel something like shame for the display of emotion, even though no one was watching. You have internalized a message somewhere along the way that said emotional display is weakness and weakness is unacceptable, and so even in your most private moments you judge yourself for the tears. I want to be very clear about where I stand on that judgment. I made tears. I built the capacity for emotional expression into your design deliberately. I wept when the people I loved were suffering. The expression of deep feeling is not a flaw in your design, it is a feature of it. Stop being ashamed of something I specifically put in you. I want to speak to the specific H of the late night thoughts, the ones that visit you in the hours when you would prefer to be sleeping, the replaying of conversations, the anticipation of tomorrow's difficulties, the unresolved questions that visit in the dark with more intensity than they carry during the daylight hours. Late night thoughts are particularly hard because you are alone with them, and because the stillness amplifies their volume, and because there is nowhere to go with them and nothing to do about them at 2 in the morning. I want to be the presence in those late night hours. Not as a magical solution that makes the thoughts stop, but as a companion in the wakefulness. Bring the circling thoughts to me when they come, not to get an immediate answer to every question, but to not be alone with them while they circle. I want to speak to the morning that follows the hard night, the way you get up and start the process of reconstructing the performance, even while still carrying the weight of what the night revealed, the way you wash your face and decide what version of okay you are going to present today. The way the first conversation of the morning where someone asks how you are doing and you say fine costs more than it looks like it costs. I see the effort that goes into each of those mornings. I see what it takes to get up and go again after the night you just had. And I want to say directly that the act of getting up and going again after a night like that is one of the most quietly courageous things a person can do. No one around you knows the cost of that particular morning. I know it, and I honor it. I want to speak to those of you who cry because of someone specific, a relationship that is painful, a person whose presence or absence or behavior is the source of a grief that you cannot fully resolve because the situation is ongoing. You cannot cry about this person to the person themselves because that conversation has either been had without resolution or feels impossible to have. You cannot cry about it to most people in your life because the explaining is complicated, or because loyalty makes it feel like a betrayal, or because you have cried to everyone you can think of and the situation has not changed, and you do not want to be the person who keeps going back to the same wound. So you cry about it alone, in the private moments, repeatedly, because the grief does not resolve and the situation does not change, and the love that is causing the pain does not stop being love because it is also causing pain. I understand that particular grief better than you might expect. Bring it to me. All of the complicated love and the complicated hurt and the complicated loyalty and the complicated anger that is wrapped up in that relationship. I can hold the full complexity of it. I want to speak to those of you who are afraid that the private crying is a sign that something is wrong with your mental health in a way that you are not able to manage alone. Who are wondering whether what you are experiencing goes beyond normal difficulty into something that needs professional support. I want to say two things about that. First, the willingness to ask that question is a sign of self-awareness and wisdom, not weakness. Second, there is no shame in the answer being yes. Getting professional support for what you are carrying is not a failure of faith or a failure of strength. It is using a resource that I have made available through the people I have specifically trained and gifted to help carry what private crying alone cannot resolve. If you have been considering whether to talk to someone, I want to be clear that seeking that help is something I am for and not against. I want to speak to those of you for whom the private crying is connected to something you feel you cannot tell anyone, because the telling would change something significant in your life or in how you are seen by people who matter to you. A truth you are carrying that has weight precisely because it is unspoken, a part of your experience that feels too complicated or too vulnerable or too consequential to bring into the light of other people's awareness. I want to be the first place that truth lives outside of your own interior. You do not have to say it to anyone else before you say it to me, but say it to me. Let it exist somewhere other than the sealed interior room where it is generating so much of what is coming out in the private moments. I want to speak to those of you who are exhausted in a way that sleep is not resolving, who go to bed tired and wake up tired and carry a tiredness through the day that rest does not seem to reach. This is soul tiredness. The tiredness that comes from carrying sustained emotional and spiritual weight over a long period of time. And the solution for soul tiredness is not more sleep. The solution is to let some of what the soul is carrying be set down. I am asking you to let me carry some of the weight that is producing that tiredness, not by pretending it does not exist or by arriving at a performed peace about it, but by actually handing it to me. By saying out loud or in writing or in the private language of your interior, this is too heavy and I need help carrying it. That honest asking is the beginning of the kind of rest that sleep alone cannot provide. I want to speak to the hope that still exists in you beneath the exhaustion and the tears. I know it is there because the tears themselves are evidence of it. You only cry about things you still care about. Indifference does not produce tears. The fact that the private moments are full of feeling rather than emptiness means that you have not given up even when you feel like you have. Something in you is still invested in the outcome, still hoping even while the hope feels painful, still believing even while the belief feels fragile. That something is what I want to speak to directly. Keep that alive. Even if everything else feels uncertain, keep that small, persistent kernel of hope from going out entirely. I can work with that. I have always been able to do more with a small flame than with a managed coldness. I want to speak to what changes when you finally allow yourself to be seen in the full truth of what you are carrying, not by everyone, not recklessly, but by someone safe. I know the fear that prevents it, the fear that the full truth will be too much, that the person will not know how to hold it, that showing the real weight of it will alter how they see you, that the vulnerability of being fully known in your pain will produce the rejection that is already your deepest fear. Those risks are real. Not every person is equipped to hold what you need to put down, but some people are. And the experience of finally saying, this is what is actually happening, and having it received with genuine presence, rather than advice or minimization or withdrawal, is one of the most healing things a human being can experience. I am asking you to find one person who is equipped to hold it and to take the risk of letting them. And before that person, before any person, come to me with the full truth of it, without the editing, without the minimization, without the version that makes the situation sound more manageable than it actually is. Come to me with the version that came out last night in the private moment, the unedited version, the one that is too heavy for you to carry. Bring that version to me and let me be present in it with you in a way that is different from the lonely privacy of carrying it alone. I collect your tears. That is not a metaphor. Every tear you have cried in private has been noticed and held and kept. Not one of them has fallen unobserved. Not one of them has been dismissed as unimportant. Not one of them has made me love you less, or think less of you, or reconsider my commitment to you. They have done the opposite. They have moved me. They have moved me towards you, and they are why I am speaking today. Because I saw what happened in the private moments, and I could not stay silent about what I saw. You are loved in the falling apart. You are loved in the crying on the bathroom floor. You are loved in the tear-stained pillow at midnight. You are loved in the exhausted morning after the hard night. You are not loved only in the moments where you have yourself together. You are loved completely and without condition in the moments where you are the most undone. Those are the moments I am most present in. Not because I am absent in the better moments, but because the undone moments are the ones where you most need presence, and I am determined to be where you most need me. So tonight, when the house is quiet again and the performance of the day ends, and the real version of what you are carrying begins to surface, let it come without shame, and know that I am in that room with you. I was there last night, and I will be there tonight, and I will be there every night until the weight begins to lift, and the private moments are less heavy, and the morning comes that does not require reconstruction before you can face it. You are not alone in the night, my child. You have never been alone in the night. I see you. I have always seen you. And what I see when I look at you is not the crying, it is the person the crying is about. The person who loves deeply enough to grieve. The person who cares enough to be broken by what breaks. The person who is still here, still trying, still holding on. That person is someone I am extraordinarily proud of. That person is going to be okay. Not today necessarily, but eventually, and with me present in every moment between now and eventually. Rest now. You do not have to have it figured out tonight. Tomorrow is a new day, and I will be in that morning too. And I am going to keep showing up in every morning and every night until the showing up is no longer needed the same way. I am not going anywhere. I saw you last night, and I am not going anywhere. I want to stay with you longer today because I know this topic touches something that rarely gets spoken about directly, and I do not want to leave it only partially addressed. I want to speak to the different kinds of crying that you have done, because they are not all the same. There is the crying that comes from acute pain, the fresh wound kind of crying where something just happened and the feeling is immediate and overwhelming. There is the crying that comes from accumulated exhaustion, where there was no single triggering event, but the weight finally exceeded capacity. There is the grief crying where loss is being processed, even if the loss happened a long time ago, and is being visited again by something in the present that echoes it. There is the frustration crying where you have tried and nothing is changing, and the crying is the body's honest response to that sustained effort without result. There is the relief crying that comes in the middle of difficulty, when something small goes right, and the release of the held breath produces tears, even though the overall situation has not resolved. Each of these is different, and each one speaks to something specific that is happening in you. I know which kind visits you most often right now, and I know what it is about, and I am in it with you regardless of the category. I want to speak to those of you who have been crying about the same thing for so long that you have started to feel impatient with yourself about it. Who have told yourself that you should be over this by now, that a person who was healing properly would not still be coming back to tears about this particular thing after this much time has passed. I want to release you from that timeline pressure right now. Grief does not follow a schedule. Loss does not resolve on demand, and the continued returning of tears to the same wound is not evidence of insufficient healing. It is evidence that the thing you lost was real, and that real losses leave real marks that take real time. Stop adding the burden of self-judgment to the already existing burden of the grief itself. I want to speak to those of you who cry and feel completely alone in the crying, even though objectively, you know that many other people are also struggling. Knowing that suffering is common does not automatically make individual suffering feel less isolating. The knowledge that others are also in pain does not reach into your specific experience and make it feel shared. You are not crying about statistics. You are crying about your actual life. And in your actual life, in the private moment, it is just you and whatever is causing the tears and the silence of the room around you. I want to enter that room with you, not to deliver a lecture about how many other people are also hurting, but to simply be present with you in your specific pain, in your specific moment, on your specific night. I want to speak to those of you who have been trying to figure out how to stop feeling so much, who have been looking for ways to turn the sensitivity down, because the sensitivity is what makes the hard things so hard. If you were less emotionally present, things would not hit as deep, and the private crying would not be so frequent or so intense. I understand the appeal of that logic. But I want to offer you a different reframe. The sensitivity that makes the pain so sharp is the same sensitivity that makes joy so rich and love so deep and beauty so moving and connection so meaningful. Turning down the sensitivity would reduce the cost of the difficult things, but it would also reduce the fullness of everything else. I did not give you a sensitive spirit as a mistake. I gave it to you as a gift that has costs the way most significant gifts do. The answer is not to become less sensitive. The answer is to build the support structures that can hold the full range of what a sensitive spirit experiences. I want to speak to those of you whose private crying sometimes tips into something darker, where the tears lead somewhere that frightens you a little, where the thoughts in the private moments venture into territory that is more concerning than ordinary grief. If that is where you are right now, I want to say something to you very directly. You do not have to stay in that alone. The darkness of those thoughts is not a destination you are meant to arrive at without company. Reach out. To me first, and then to a real person, a friend, a family member, a counselor, a crisis line if the thoughts are acute. What happens in the darkest private moments is not meant to stay private. It is meant to be brought into the light where it loses some of its power and where help becomes possible. Please reach out. You are worth the reaching. I want to speak to those of you who feel guilty for crying when you are aware that other people have it worse. The comparison voice that says you do not have the right to this level of pain when others are facing situations that are objectively more severe. I want to address that directly. Pain is not a competition. Your suffering does not become invalid because someone else is suffering more severely. The fact that others are in more extreme situations does not mean you should be fine. You are allowed to be in pain about what is actually painful in your own life without first calculating whether your suffering meets some threshold of acceptable severity. Stop comparing your inside experience to someone else's circumstances and deciding that yours does not qualify for acknowledgement. I want to speak to the very specific loneliness of being someone who is seen as strong by the people around you. When your reputation is strength, it creates a particular isolation around your private struggles because the people in your life have been relating to you as a resource rather than as a person who also has needs. They come to you with their difficulties, and you hold space for them, and you offer wisdom, and you show up with steadiness. And they leave those conversations having received something real from you. But they rarely think to ask what you might need because the version of you they have come to know does not seem to need things. You created that impression partly by design, and it has now become kind of trap. The very image that makes you valuable to others in their hard moments is also the image that prevents them from showing up for you in yours. I see the isolation that lives inside that particular reputation. I want to speak to those of you who learned very early that other people's feelings were more important than yours, who grew up in an environment where your emotional experience was consistently subordinated to someone else's, where the message, whether spoken or demonstrated, was that your feelings were an inconvenience and other people's feelings were the priority. You learned to handle your feelings in private because handling them in front of others created problems. And that early lesson is still running in your adult life long after the environment that produced it is gone. You still manage your feelings in private by default. You still instinctively treat your own emotional experience as something to be handled quietly and not imposed on others. That lesson served a purpose once. It does not need to be the operating system of your adult life. I want to speak to what it means to receive comfort, because I think some of you have forgotten how to receive it, and that forgetting is part of why the private moments carry so much. Receiving comfort requires a posture of openness that years of self-management can make difficult. It requires allowing another person or allowing me to have access to the actual wound rather than the managed version of it. It requires not deflecting the care when it comes, because deflecting is so automatic that it happens before you have consciously decided to receive. Practice receiving. When someone offers genuine kindness in a moment where you are struggling, let it actually reach you instead of bouncing off the surface of the management. It will feel vulnerable. That is correct. Vulnerability is the price of genuine comfort, and genuine comfort is worth the price. I want to speak to the morning after this kind of message, the morning where you wake up and the difficulty is still present and the inbox of unresolved situations is unchanged and the tears from last night have dried, but the thing that caused them has not changed. I do not want you to measure the value of what was said here by whether things look different tomorrow morning. The value is not in the immediate resolution. The value is in being genuinely seen in a moment when you needed to be seen. The value is in knowing that the private moments are not as private as they feel. The value is in carrying forward something small but real about not being alone in this. Let that be enough for today. Let the seeing be enough for today and trust that the rest follows in its own time. Here is what I want you to hold in the days ahead. When the private moment comes tonight or tomorrow night or in whatever quiet space the next one finds you, I want you to remember that I am already there before you arrive at it. I am not surprised by the tears. I am not waiting for you to pull yourself together before I can be present with you. I am present with you in the undone versions. I am present with you in the tired versions and the confused versions and the overwhelmed versions and the versions that have no adequate words for what they are feeling. Those are the versions I show up for most completely because those are the versions that most need showing up for. You are not too much in your pain. You are not too needy in your tears. You are not too broken to be loved. You are not too far gone to be held. You are a person I created and love completely and have never once looked away from, and I saw what happened last night, and I am here because of it, and I am not going anywhere until the weight begins to lift and the private moments begin to carry less, and the morning comes that does not cost as much as the recent ones have cost. I love you in the crying. I love you in the exhausted morning after. I love you in the holding together during the day. I love you in all the versions. And I am with you in every single one of them, even the ones you thought were only witnessed by the walls. You are seen, my child. Completely and always and without condition. You are seen. Let me give you a little more, because I know some of you needed this to go deeper still, and I am not ready to leave you without speaking to the things that are still sitting unaddressed underneath everything I have already said. I want to speak to the way the private crying affects how you see yourself the next day. There is sometimes a kind of vulnerability hangover that follows the nights where the tears finally came. You wake up feeling slightly exposed, even though no one saw anything. As if the fact that you broke down alone means you are now somehow less of what you were before it happened. I want to challenge that perception directly. The you that existed after the crying is not diminished. If anything, you are lighter because something was released that had been held too long. The exposure you feel the next morning is the feeling of having been honest with yourself in a moment that usually gets managed, and that honesty is not something to feel ashamed of. It is something to feel relieved by. I want to speak to those of you who are parents trying to be strong for your children while privately carrying more than your children will ever know. The particular pressure of that role is unique because your private moments have to actually be private. You cannot fall apart in front of them the way you might allow yourself to fall apart alone, because they need the stable version of you to anchor their world. And so the management is more complete and more sustained, and the private moments when they come are carrying an even heavier load because everything that was held during the hours of visible parenting has to come out somewhere. I see what that costs you. The quiet heroism of carrying that much in the private moments, so that the daytime can be stable for the people who depend on you is not small. And I want to be the place where the full weight can be set down, even if only temporarily. Even if only in the private moments when the children are finally asleep, I want to speak to those of you who have specific memories that visit in the private moments. A moment from your past that still carries pain. Something that happened that was never fully processed and that finds its way to the surface in the quiet. The memory that arrives at night with the same weight it carried when it was fresh, even though years have passed. These revisiting memories are not evidence that you have failed to heal from the past. They are evidence that certain things from the past deserve more processing than they received. If a specific memory keeps returning with this kind of weight, it is asking for attention. Not the attention of endlessly reliving it, but the attention of finally bringing it fully to light with proper support around it. Some memories need to be spoken before they can lose the power they carry in the private hours. I want to speak to those of you who have had the experience of crying about something and not fully knowing why. A sudden overwhelming feeling that does not connect cleanly to a specific cause. The tears come and you are not sure exactly what they are about, even though the feeling is completely real. This can be the body releasing accumulated stress that had not been processed at the conscious level. It can be the spirit responding to something that the mind has not yet translated into language. It can be grief that belongs to multiple sources, arriving all at once in a wave that is too complex to assign to a single cause. You do not always need to know exactly what the tears are about in order for their release to be meaningful. Sometimes they simply need to come out and the meaning becomes clearer afterward. I want to speak to the connection between the private crying and what you actually need right now. Often the tears are pointing toward a specific need that is not being met, a need for rest, a need for genuine connection, a need for support with something that is too heavy to carry alone, a need for a conversation that has not happened, a need for resolution of something that remains unresolved. A need for permission to stop doing something you have been forcing yourself to keep doing. If you can sit with the question of what the tears are trying to communicate beyond the pain itself, you may find that they are pointing towards something specific and actionable. Not always. Sometimes the tears are simply the body processing experience, but sometimes they are a very honest signal toward what needs to change. I want to speak to those of you for whom this message arrived on what was already a particularly hard day. Not just a generally difficult season, but a day that had something specific in it that made the private moment last night, or this morning, or right now particularly acute. A conversation that went badly, a piece of news that landed hard. A reminder of something you have been trying not to think about too directly. A moment where the difficulty felt more immediate and close than it usually does. I want to say to you specifically on this specific hard day that you are going to get through today, not because today is going to be easy, but because you have gotten through hard days before, and because I am with you in this one the same way I was in those. 1 hour at a time if necessary, one moment at a time if that is what it takes. I want to speak to those of you who are reading this and feeling something in your chest loosen a little, a small release in a place that has been held tight. That loosening is real and it is meaningful even if it is small. Do not dismiss it because it is not a complete resolution. A small loosening is still a beginning. Let it be what it is, a moment of being genuinely seen producing a small but real response in the part of you that needed to be seen. That is enough for today. That is actually quite a lot. And here is my final word to you. I want you to go into the rest of today carrying one thing, one specific thing that I am asking you to hold on to from everything that has been said, and it is simply this. The private moments are not private from me. Whatever happens in the next quiet moment that finds you, I am already there. The room is not empty when you enter it to fall apart. I am in it, and I receive everything that comes out in those moments with the same love and the same presence, and the same unwillingness to look away that I have always had. Nothing you feel in private will ever make me love you less. Nothing. And that is not a conditional statement with hidden exceptions. It is absolute. You are loved in the mess of the hardest private moment as completely as you have ever been loved in your best public moment. That love does not fluctuate based on what I see. It simply is. And it is yours. And I want you to know it today, even if you cannot fully feel it yet. I saw you. I am here. I love you. And I am not going anywhere. One last thing before you go. I want you to do something small tonight. When the private moment comes and the weight of the day settles in around you, I want you to speak out loud, not to anyone in the room, just into the air. Say what is actually happening, not the managed version, the real version. Even one honest sentence spoken aloud into a room that feels empty is an act of bringing what is inside into the outside. And I want to tell you that the room is not empty when you do it. I am listening. I have always been listening. And the honesty of one real sentence spoken in a private moment is the beginning of the kind of openness that healing requires. You do not have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to start. Start tonight. I will be there.